I am speaking to you today as a graduate of the Faculty of Law or as a graduate of the University of Colombo. During our time, we couldn't imagine going overseas for education because the foreign exchange permitted at that time was only £5 if you want to go abroad, and you couldn't purchase an air ticket in Sri Lanka. You had to get somebody overseas to send you an air ticket. So that was our economy until 1977. So with the open economy, things have changed dramatically, and we were the first in South Asia to open the economy together with the trend of globalization. So globalization now, it started in the 1980s, is about nearly 37 or coming close to 40 years. But the question we have to ask ourselves is whether we have achieved the objectives of globalization, right? Like many leads given to the world, America gave the lead in globalization, right? Whether for good or bad. And there was, at that time, what was known as the Washington Consensus. It was felt that with the opening of the world economy, with free trade, democracy will also progress. Countries will change. Of course, it has happened to a great extent. The Soviet Union, the breakdown of the Soviet Union, right? The Chinese moved towards a capitalist economy. All these have taken place. The world has progressed. China has achieved great economic strides. At the same time, you must also realize that dictatorships have also emerged during this period, right? Africa, South America, right? And some of these dictators have led the world, their own economies to disaster, right? Zimbabwe is a good example, and I picked this book while I was in Hong Kong, The Last Resort. This is written by a journalist, and it is very hilarious as well. If you can get hold of this book, please read how Mugabe led Zimbabwe into disaster. That was the first phase, where they had to even print a $10 trillion note or something like that. And now they are going into the second phase, right? Because they are having a currency problem again. So globalization has led to two divides. One, certain countries have benefited from globalization, certain countries have grown poorer. Now, in order to withstand globalization, you must be economically strong. Even the Western countries will respect you if you are economically strong, right? Take Singapore as an example, right? Hong Kong as an example. They are small countries, but economically strong. We can withstand any pressure from the West, right? So much so, some time ago, one of the American secretaries of state said, when the Singapore minister says something, we take it seriously. Even when Lee Kuan Yew was living, he went all over the world lecturing world leaders as a college professor. But they took him very seriously. So for poor countries, if you are economically poor, globalization is exploitation. I don't have to tell you, if you are an economist, you will know. There are so many writings on Bangladesh, right? Showing the exploitation of the Bangladesh workers by Western countries. So therefore, I am a strong believer in the East Asian economic model. Sri Lanka has all the ingredients to become a first world nation, right? But unfortunately, we have not achieved that objective. Even now, it is not too late. We can achieve the objectives, but we must have strong political leadership. That is very important, right? Again, Lee Kuan Yew, Dr. Mahathir, they are the best examples. When they confronted a problem, they confronted it head on. They did not retract, right? Now what happens in Sri Lanka is, when the government puts out a proposal, when there is an opposition, we retract. You can't do that, right? You have to take the bull by its horn, so, as they say, right? And that is what Lee Kuan Yew did for Singapore. That is what Mahathir did for Malaysia. But if you backtrack, then we will not go anywhere. So, in the first part of my lecture, right, I don't have to say, we had a head start in Asia. Everyone knows that. Japan was devastated by the Second World War, so therefore our economy was stronger than the Japanese. Then, as I have highlighted in my PowerPoints, you will see, our education system was one of the best in the region. Our health service was one of the best in the region. Our universities were one of the best in the region. At that time, we had the law school was one of the best in the Commonwealth. The engineering faculty was one of the best in the Commonwealth. The Colombo medical faculty was one of the best in the Commonwealth. But all that, why did we let go? That is the point made by Lee Kuan Yew. What you achieve in 100 years, you can lose in 10 years. And he uses Sri Lanka as an example in his public speeches. Why? Because he does not want Singapore to go down. That is why the PAP is so strict. They will never allow the opposition to gain power. Right? The hegemony of the PAP, they will not allow anyone to challenge. One of the reasons is that they don't want the economic achievements of Singapore to go down the drain. It's a small country. We cannot take a risk with confrontational politics. Right? So, I don't endorse the Singapore style of politics. I lived there 5 years, I left. I won't stay there. I won't take permanent residence in Singapore, and I don't invest in Singapore because of it's a totalitarian regime. But economically, they have delivered. Right? So any Sri Lankan will go and settle in Singapore. There is no problem, because economically you will be well off. So as long as you don't challenge the state, you can survive in Singapore. Right? Very interesting during my time. Right? Singapore for very long had a two-child policy. Then they found that their population was going down. So suddenly the government overnight announced in Parliament, we are reversing the two-child policy. You can have any number of children if you want. Right? So very interesting. An expat lecturer from the Faculty of Law, he enacted the Procreation Act to show the reversal of the government policy. Now in any other country, everyone would have had a very good laugh, because it was a good enactment. It was a fictitious enactment to show the reversal of the one-child policy. But he was asked to leave. Within 24 hours, he was told, you have to pack up and leave Singapore. You can't stay here, because you have challenged the authority of the state. That is how they do it. Right? But at the same time, please remember, in Singapore, they allow expatriates. 50% of the staff in the university is expatriate. Doctors, 50% expatriate. Right? They use the best talent from the world to move Singapore forward. So if we are going to survive globalization, if we are going to turn around Sri Lanka's economy, we have to allow foreigners to come and work in this country. Right? So the doctors have to change their attitudes. With the International Port Financial Center, you have to allow foreign law firms to come, inevitable. Right? Otherwise, the International Financial Center cannot move forward. Right? So will our lawyers allow foreign law firms to come in? Will our doctors, that is of course outside the International Financial Center, if Sri Lanka is to emerge as a medical hub, will they allow foreign doctors to come and work? You have to, otherwise we can't become a medical hub. If we are going to be an educational center, if foreign universities are going to be set up in Sri Lanka, or if foreign degrees are being offered through proxies in Sri Lanka, then you have to allow foreign expatriate lecturers to come. Otherwise, we won't move forward. So you can't have both ways. If you are going to move in this globalized world, right? If our economy is going to be turned around, right? Today, when we go out at immigration centers, we are treated as housemaids or laborers. Right? Even President's Council Kanageshwaran had a problem at the Hague airport. He was detained and he was not allowed to go in. That is because we are treated as a poor nation. People know us as exporting housemaids and laborers, even though we have very good professionals in this country. So our attitudes must change. Right? We must have a forward-looking policy. Otherwise, we will not reach it. So my focus today is on the international financial sector, right? But we cannot survive, right? We are heading, if we don't turn our economy around, we are heading for a debt crisis. And debt crisis, I don't have to speak. You just look at the countries which have had debt crises or which are going to have debt crises, right? Today, Zimbabwe is going to go another cycle. Egypt devalued its currency by 52%. Venezuela, despite its oil wealth, of course oil prices have gone down, but people are looting shops to survive. 3, and I will put Sri Lanka number 4, because if we don't repay our debt, we are heading for a debt crisis. How are we going to repay? To repay, we must earn foreign exchange, right? How are we going to earn foreign exchange, right? Our traditional exports will not bring in enough money. So these are questions for economists to answer, right? Though I am a lawyer, right? But one thing, right? Before I left overseas, I was working with Lalit Mudali. I have learned a lot from him. One thing he told me, and he told the other lawyers in the chambers, that a lawyer with a little economics can do a better job than an economics person. And that has stuck in my mind even until today. Right? So though I went out with a legal training, with my interaction with accountants, business graduates, I am more economics oriented rather than a black letter lawyer. Okay, so in my first part, I have posed questions based on right, why are we poor today? We had a head start, but we went back, right? So maybe one reason I'm thinking is, right, the East Asian countries were poor when they received independence, right? When Singapore broke away from Malaysia, there were 2 versions. One is Malaysia said, you broke away. Right? But Lee Kuan said, you chased us out. Right? Whichever version, right, Lee Kuan Yew cried on TV on that day when when Singapore had to leave the Malay Federation. Lee Kuan Yew cried because he knew on its own Singapore could not survive. Even water had to come from Malaysia, a very small land base, right? Just bare land. Look at the photos of Singapore before development and compare it with the Jaffna Peninsula, identical, right? Just bare land, no trees, but today, see what Singapore is today. So, the choice is very clear. So, looking back, what I feel is these countries were poor, they had to survive, so they avoided confrontational politics from the very beginning. But take Sri Lanka, we were economically comfortable, no problem. We had very good foreign reserves, right? We could import everything. So the politicians fought each other on racism, language, etc., which took us nowhere. So that economic development went to the backstage rather than coming forward to the center stage, right? So all that is history now, right? All that is history. So what we have to do is, of course, we opened up our economy in 1977, first to do so in Asia. But looking back, we have achieved. But where did we go wrong? Why have we accumulated such a massive debt? have we lived beyond our means? Those are questions, again, which economists have to answer. Right? So, moving away, right? My first PowerPoint shows, I'm showing Sri Lanka's picture at the time of independence and the downward trend. Right? Then we had the open economy. Right? Now, open economy, right, as far as my own personal view is concerned, we have not achieved the objectives of an open economy. It's very important for small countries, we have to build massive reserves, because it is then we will withstand external shocks. Right? Switzerland has the highest reserves in the world. Singapore also has one of the highest reserves. Hong Kong also has one of the highest reserves. So that for economic development, we don't borrow from anybody. We don't have to borrow, right? And after the British left, Singapore's landscape has completely changed. After the British left, Hong Kong's landscape has completely changed. The entire railway system is different now. When I go there, I find it has changed. Now, all this requires massive capital, because going underground is not easy. It requires massive capital. But all that financed by the reserves of the Hong Kong government. So monetary management has to be given to experts, right? So when the Honorable Prime Minister speaks of the Temasek model. Now, what is the Temasek model in Singapore? That is the investment arm of the Singapore government. Right? So Singapore has massive reserves. We can't invest all the money in Singapore. It has to be invested overseas. And those investments have to be safe, not like the Greek bonds. So you need experts. You need the top economists in your country. If you can't get it, we'll get it from overseas. So Temasek manages the foreign investment of of Singapore. But when we speak of the Temasek model in Sri Lanka, people laugh, the opposition laughs. They say something wrong with the Temasek model. Right? No, that is wrong. So that is not the politics we want if Sri Lanka is to move forward. Right? So I do not know, I don't think it will be achieved during our time, but one of my dreams is to see that one day Sri Lanka has enough reserves so that it can cushion any economic crisis. The currency will be stable. Right? We can't go on depreciating our currency every year, right? So that we become a pauper nation. No. We must be a nation where every citizen of Sri Lanka lives with dignity. So as I told the Reverend when we are having tea, Sri Lanka is poor by choice. We have done it ourselves. We have become poorer. Right? Sri Lanka has all the ingredients to be a first world nation, and certainly at the time of independence, we were spoken of, not only internally, outside Sri Lanka, as the Switzerland of the East. Right? In fact, we have the terrain. You go up country, the terrain is indistinguishable from the terrain of Switzerland. Go to Switzerland and see. Right? Go to Hantana. When you enter Kandy, look at Hantana, and look, if you have the chance to go to Switzerland, look at the hills of Switzerland when you travel by train. Indistinguishable from Sri Lanka. Right? So where are we today? So these are questions we have to answer, and all Sri Lankans, we should contribute to this. Okay. So with that background, now we go into the background to the emergence of IFCs. Right? Now, setting up, right? I don't know when the port city will be complete. Will it be in 2 years' time or 2 years' time, right? So the original concept of the port city was different, right? The original concept was different. There's a PowerPoint on that. Can you focus that PowerPoint, please, on the port city under the previous government? It was not envisaged as an international financial center. This has been obtained from an advertisement. Can you focus that advertisement, please? It appeared Colombo Port City. Colombo Port City. The next one. No. This one. Colombo Port City. That's good, right? This is from an advertisement. I think it appeared in the Ceylon Asset Management something, right? Now this is the original concept of the port city as envisaged by the previous government, right? So it was going to be an island, right? With, of course, with various business interests, with also living, people living in the port city, right? So the present government, of course, this was an issue in the election, all of you know. So the present government has decided that the Colombo Port City will be an international financial center, right? Now that concept by itself is very good, right? But the point is, setting up an international financial center is not easy, right? Again, it requires a lot of commitment, it requires a lot of planning, it requires a lot of legislative enactments, right? The legal infrastructure must be put in place, right? So, can we go back to the PowerPoint on the background to the emergence of IFCs, right? So, the international financial centers, the emergence of the modern international financial center as we know today goes back to globalization, right? Now what is globalization, right? As I have indicated here, basically it is the term we use where countries freed their economies. So earlier most countries had the closed economic model. Right? Sri Lanka is the best example. We all know how we went through the closed economy. We survived, but we went through, right? We had to stay in long queues to buy a piece of cloth to stitch a trouser or to buy some clothes, and most of this material came from China, right? And we have, right? And the Sri Lanka government in 1951, we were one of the first countries to recognize the People's Republic of China after the communist takeover, right? So we have very close relations with China. China has been a great economic partner for Sri Lanka. So the Soviet Union breaks down, right? Many countries open their economy, but sometimes not fully. For example, we know even until today, our capital account is closed, right? We can get foreign exchange, but only for authorized purposes. We cannot freely take out money out of Sri Lanka, convert it into foreign currency, and take it out, right? So a combination of factors helped to free the world economy from controls. The key word at that time was control, right? So much so, one back said, in Sri Lanka, we had even a board of control for cricket. So that even cricket was controlled at that time, right? Because everything was controlled. Now with globalization, right, there was free movement of foreign exchange. But even before international financial centers were set up, Singapore and Hong Kong within this region, they were financial centers. That is because a lot of people who earn foreign exchange, who were restricted by their own countries from openly operating foreign accounts, had to deposit their money outside, right? So Singapore was the pioneer in what is known as the Asian dollar market. That is US dollars held by Asians outside the United States. So Singapore encouraged these people to come and deposit their Asian dollars in Singapore, right? And Singapore had a big market, meaning a small island surrounded by Indonesia. Indonesia had a lot of Chinese merchants who had a lot of foreign currency. Malaysia also had, right? The Chinese dominate the Malaysian trade as well. So these people had to have an outlet to deposit their money outside, right? And with the communist takeover in China, right? A lot of Chinese who had foreign currency had to find an outlet to deposit their money. So they found Hong Kong to be a convenient center, right? So even before the emergence of the international financial center, as we know, Hong Kong and Singapore were financial centers because they had no foreign exchange control. They are very small islands. So they had to survive on, they couldn't survive on agriculture because the land was insufficient for agriculture, right? So they had to survive on entrepot trade. They had to survive on foreign money coming into the country, right? So today, the well-established financial centers are Tokyo, then we have Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, recent origin, Luxembourg, London, New York. So when we speak of an international financial center, please remember the first question is, we are going to compete with these centers. How are we going to do it? So we have to get the plan correct, right? It can't be just a financial center. Just for the name, we can't open a financial center and make it a flop. No. It has to succeed. And to succeed, you need the right people. You can't make political appointments, right? They have to be qualified people. If you can't get them from Sri Lanka, get them from outside Sri Lanka, right? So it is inevitable, you will have to, if you are going to set up an international financial center, you have to let in foreign law firms. And foreign law firms mean not just one or two lawyers, right? Now Baker and McKenzie, they have appeared in the Sri Lanka papers. They have been misquoted. Now Baker and McKenzie is a law firm. It's an American law firm, and it's one of the first American law firms to be let into Singapore when Singapore opened its doors to foreign law firms. But even Singapore did not allow Baker and McKenzie to come overnight. They did a vetting process, right? But Baker and McKenzie is recognized as the first American law firm to be let into Singapore. However, now here, the customs trade unions are saying Baker and McKenzie is to be permitted to collect taxes in Sri Lanka. It's the most absurd statement you can make. Will a law firm collect taxes in a country, right? Baker and McKenzie, as I understand from the Secretary to the Treasury, they have been given a mandate to draft certain laws, possibly for the International Financial Center, maybe to update our tax laws, but they are not going to collect tax. So the customs union, they put out a statement, even politicians are making statements that we are going to, right, allow an American law firm to collect taxes. But the irony is, the government doesn't come out with a rebuttal. They must come out with a rebuttal and say, right, and put the issue in the correct perspective, but they don't do that. So then this hearsay is repeated several times, right? So when a lie is repeated, normally they quote one of the Hitler's lieutenant on this. People think it is the truth, right? So, right, let's see. So, in the next PowerPoint background, I have given you the background to the emergence of international financial centers. So the point I'm making is, right, in one of my PowerPoints, that international financial centers are not created in a vacuum. It can't spring overnight. You have to lay the foundation, right? So when Singapore, under the new constitution, we have to change the electoral system. If we don't change the electoral system, again, we have no future for this country, right? So with just one more point, I have not touched on everything because of the time factor, right? maybe the Department of Economics can put my PowerPoint into subject to copyright. They can put it into print form and distribute, right? Because this will be a very valuable document. The one other point I want to deal with will be the regulatory framework will be important, right? Now here again, send your people to Singapore has the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Hong Kong has the monetary HKMA, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, right? Now these two jurisdictions are unique because we don't have a central bank. There is no central bank in Hong Kong, there is no central bank in Singapore. In a way it is good if you look, because of the bond scam in Sri Lanka, in a sense it's good we don't have a central bank in Hong Kong or in Singapore, right? So we operate without a central bank. And again, Hong Kong is unique. Currency is printed not by the government of Hong Kong but by the private banks. Originally, right, the HSBC, Hong Kong Bank, is normally referred to as the de facto central bank of Hong Kong because in the absence of a central bank, they perform the functions of a central bank. So currency traditionally was printed by Hong Kong Bank. Then Standard Chartered was given a certain percentage, and after 1997, the Bank of China prints currency notes, about 10%. Standard Chartered 20%, the rest by HSBC. So it is prestigious, right? You don't make money by printing currency because Hong Kong is a fully backed currency. For every Hong Kong dollar printed, you have to deposit the equivalent with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, right? So for every, for the total amount of Hong Kong dollars in circulation, there's an equal amount deposited with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. So it's a fully backed currency. Now that option was taken in 1987 because 1987, the formal announcement was made. Mrs. Thatcher visited Beijing, right? The formal announcement was made by Mrs. Thatcher and Chairman Deng that Hong Kong will be handed over to China in 1997. So there was an economic crisis created by the announcement. All property values in Hong Kong went down. Banks suffered a massive loss. The currency went down. So they had to find a solution. So the Hong Kong government found a solution by pegging the Hong Kong dollar to the US dollar. So today, $1 US gives you 7.75. It's a fixed exchange rate. And to make the currency more stable, they said you have to deposit the equivalent with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. So, right, so the question the Sri Lankan authorities will have to decide is this. We will have to create a Sri Lanka, the Monetary Authority of Sri Lanka to oversee the international financial center. You will have to get the top people, right? For example, the head of the Monetary Authority of Singapore and Hong Kong, they are headhunted every 5 years. And the salary offered to him is so great. For example, the salary of the governor of the central bank will be peanuts, right? Appointed for a 5-year term. Get the best man from the world to head the monetary authority. Now, are we prepared to do that? That is the question, right? Because we have regulations in Sri Lanka, you can't pay more than the government salary. So if the government salary is 60,000, you have to pay him 60,000. Now, will the head of a monetary authority come for 60,000 rupees? You have to pay him in US dollar terms. And the other people to operate the monetary authority will have to be top people. So here again, will Sri Lankans be prepared? Will the government have the political will to say, we will get the best people in? And of course, the next question will be, will the Sri Lanka Monetary Authority, will it be autonomous or will it be appended to the central bank? That question also, it will become a political issue. Definitely it will become a political issue, right? So during the short while I have been here, I have come to the conclusion that to govern Sri Lanka is not easy. right? Because of the various forces. In fact, it's easy to govern Singapore. It's easy to govern Hong Kong because you don't get so many challenges. People don't go to courts. Everything, something happens, we don't go to courts in Singapore or Hong Kong challenging governmental action. So in that sense, it's easy to govern Singapore or Hong Kong, though they are much, in terms of the economy, they are much worse than the Sri Lankan economy, right? So we can speak of the international financial center, but the challenges are formidable, right? And we will have to bring expatriates in, right? Foreign law firms, they are not small, right? Law firms in Hong Kong, Singapore, 150 staff members, 150 lawyers, 200 lawyers, right? So we will create employment opportunities both for Sri Lankans as well, right? But we have to move this place forward, right? So in my PowerPoint, of course, also I have spoken of the revenue measures for the how revenue, the government must also get revenue because we have to build up our foreign reserves, right? So can you place my PowerPoints on need for a high workforce, right? The sources of revenue for the government, that is one before the last. Can you fix it on that, right? So I have suggested sources of revenue for the government of Sri Lanka, how revenue can be generated for the, yeah, that's the one, right? Now the first point I'm making is, now I have again read in the newspapers that tax holidays will be given. In fact, tax holidays are outdated, right? We don't give tax holidays, even the Chinese government doesn't give tax holidays, right? So corporate tax everyone pays corporate tax in Singapore, Hong Kong, 15%. So there is no problem in paying 15% corporate tax, right? So every institution which operates in the international financial sector can pay 15% corporate tax, because that will be, because we have to certainly lighten the VAT burden on the common man. So we have to find other sources of income, right? So that is the first suggestion I have made, 15% corporate tax. Then, now this is also an English law concept, right? It's not, in Roman Dutch law, we own the land in our own right. But in English law, all land belongs to the crown. So if you apply the same concept, and definitely all land in the port city will belong to the government. So the government can give leasehold, 99 years. Now the leasehold rental, which will, the income which will bring to the government will be a very big source of income, because it's going to be a massive land area. Right? In addition, I am suggesting, right now, on all leasehold property in Hong Kong, Singapore, we pay what is called a government rent. That's a very nominal rent, about we'll say 5% of the annual value, and we also pay an assessment rent, which of course we pay in Sri Lanka to the local authorities. But the port city will not come under any local authority, so there is no harm in paying the assessment rent to the government. Now these are small amounts, but if you take the whole of Hong Kong, the amount of flats and commercial buildings which are there, the rent generated to the Hong Kong government is very enormous. That is why in Hong Kong, corporate tax, income tax is only 15%. We pay only 15%. But still the government doesn't borrow, they have enough money, because that is a very good source of income, right? So those are the tax measures I have suggested. Then just going back, the previous PowerPoint, now this is very important, and this is also important even today. We must have a very highly trained commercial crime bureau. Now here again we get our facts. Today's Financial Times says the bribery commission is to be replaced by a fraud bureau. Now that is again, we are mixing up. Fraud bureau has nothing to do with the bribery commission. The bribery commission is tasked with bribery and corruption. The fraud bureau, the word has been taken from English legislation, deals with white collar crime, commercial crime, right? So with globalization and with the setting up of an international financial center, white collar crime will go up. So we need a highly trained commercial crime bureau to investigate and prosecute white collar crime. That is the suggestion I have been there, right? Like a college professor, I can go on speaking for hours, like Obama also is going back to teaching, right, after his presidency ends. So I think I have given you lot of food for thought, right? That is the role of an academic. We give you points where you have to develop further, right? We don't give you the answers to every problem, but we guide you in the right track so that you will also be thinkers. So with that, I will end my speech. That is, we have to have the laws in place, right? Of course, now the problem is, as it is, if you create a separate jurisdiction, there is going to be a challenge in the Supreme Court. They might say you may even require a referendum, because the thinking of our judges is very narrow, right? We call it black letter law, but black letter law is no longer applied in the United States or in an English jurisdiction, right? So, but when the new constitution comes into place, right? So my suggestion is, though I didn't touch on that, we will have to have a separate chapter in the new constitution providing for the legal framework for the International Financial Center, because when the new constitution is enacted, the Supreme and once the cabinet certifies that this constitution requires a 2/3 majority and a referendum, the Supreme Court has no jurisdiction. Right? It goes directly for the vote in Parliament and for a referendum. Right? So that is the foresight which J.R. Jawan has seen for enacting a new constitution. So any draft new constitution will not go for challenge before the Supreme Court. So 2 years, right, where the framework for the enactment of the new constitution is next year. So when the new constitution is enacted, we have to get a separate chapter putting all these things in the court structure, the law to be applied into the chapter of the new constitution, and I am sure that the government will